Hey, how's it going everyone? This is the Spegmeister, and welcome to part 7 in my Halo Anniversary Legendary walkthrough. On this episode, I will be running through the library.
We must collect the index before we can activate the installation.
As soon as we're dropped in the library, we'll be greeted by a host of infection forms ahead. And then off in this corner we'll have some more infection forms as well as a carrier unit. And these guys can be somewhat useful on Legendary, but they can also be rather annoying if they work against you. So the way they work is as soon as you do enough damage to them, they'll drop down to the floor and set up an explosion. So in a way you can treat them like a grenade. And then a common theme throughout the level is you'll deal with the flood dropping through the vents. And whenever you feel like you're getting overwhelmed by the flood, just back away from them as far as you need to, and just continue shooting them. At some point early on, you'll want to get your hands on a shotgun, which I'm currently looking around for. Sometimes it can be a little hard if the carrier form just sets off an explosion and knocks it away.
We are near the index chamber. Follow me.
So like I said, just back up as far as you need to if the flood just continue to rush you. And ideally you want to avoid circumstances such as that where the carrier forms blow up in your face.
The energy field above us contains.
When you come to the center of the library, just look to your left and right. You'll have carrier forms and combat forms to deal with down low with you. It's generally easier to just run to one side of the room and deal with the enemies and then turn around and finish off the remaining. Now this is a pretty nice area to hold off the flood in this hallway. So what you can do is just try to get their attention, and you can use your grenades and shotgun and then hide right inside the library in the innermost part and let the flood just ball knuck their way through. Also keep an eye out behind you for any infection forms that come from the center of the library. Eventually they'll work their way from the bottom pit and try to find their way to you. So for this part, it just works best to use the pistol to try to target as many of these combat forms from distance before swapping out to the shotgun. And the reason I like doing that is so that I can serve on as many shells for the shotgun as I need to, because the shotgun is a very valuable tool for this mission. And then up on that ledge, you'll just have one combat form with an assault rifle to deal with.
Security doors have sealed automatically. I will go access the override to open them. Please follow closely. This portal is the first of 10. Puzzling. You brought such ineffective weapons to combat the flood, despite the
Another common theme with this mission, other than with the flood spawning through the vents, when you cross a certain point on the floor, you'll trigger the flood to spawn in. So whenever you come across those trigger points, it's just best to back away as far as you need to. And of course, you don't want to find yourself getting surrounded by the flood. That's probably every gamer's worst nightmare if you're playing on Legendary. So here's one example of crossing an invisible line, triggering the flood to spawn in. And so the way to deal with the flood in these circumstances is to either run past them as quickly as possible, using your shotgun and grenades sparingly. Otherwise, what you can do is hide behind this corner and let them come to you one at a time. It's also a good idea to use your grenades every so often to clear out any other grenades dropped by the flood. That way you won't have to worry about setting off a chain explosion, either by your grenade or by killing a carrier form. So I was able to predict that those flood were gonna spawn in those two vents, and I was able to use the plasma grenade to try and knock out as much damage as I could to each of them. So sometimes that can work really well to your benefit. So right around that corner is a health kit, and then down below here is an overshield power-up. But before you pick up either of those, go ahead and clear out this hallway first. To your left, about midway through the hall, you'll find those combat forms on your left, and then there will be some carrier forms to your right. In most situations, I consider the combat forms the greater threat, but if you find yourself in a place where you can kill the carrier form while the combat forms are nearby, you can just shoot the carrier form and set off the explosion and wipe out all the combat forms standing nearby.
This installation's research facilities are most impressive. Perhaps we'll have to see them later.
Before you turn around and deal with enemies behind you, go ahead and just try to clear out these enemies in front as best as you can. Once that area is clear, then go ahead and come back for the health kit and the overshield power up. Right before you reach the elevator, just make sure you have a frag grenade in hand, and go ahead and chuck it down and knock out the group of combat forms waiting at the other end. And then you can just let the sentinels clean up the remaining infection forms, as long as they don't jump on the elevator after you. Once you come up, turn to your right, and then you can chuck either a frag grenade or a plasma grenade and kill all the carrier forms. Just be mindful of where they drop. Like that one got a little too close for comfort. And just like on the first floor, you can let the sentinels deal with these guys. So when you come into this room, just make your way all the way over to this locked door. And this is the best place to hold out if you're gonna fight all these enemies. Just be careful as you're fighting through this room that you don't get yourself caught in a corner. As soon as the doors open, go ahead and make your way through, and then target the next group ahead for the sentinels. Once those guys are down, you can go ahead and come back and pick up one of the health kits left behind in this room. And I didn't show it here, but there are two other health kits that are in a lower crevice in that room. So in case if you use that one up, you can find two more further back in the room.
Weapons to manage the flood only for a short time. Speed is of the essence.
This next group ahead around the corner, you'll want to look out for the flood that has the rocket launcher. If he happens to fire a rocket, just be ready to move either to your left or your right.
right here.
The rocket launcher is optional to pick up if you're playing on Legendary. I personally think the pistol works really well for the engagements that you'll have for the most part on Legendary. But if you want to have a little bit of fun if you're playing on the lower difficulties, there's nothing against using the rocket launcher. This next part you'll want to be really careful to clear out underneath, because these carrier forms, if you get too close, will easily kill you unless if you can get around a corner quick enough. So just take this part somewhat slow as you're clearing out these carrier forms. Right here, go ahead and kill the first combat form that drops down, and then back up into this hallway so that you can take cover behind the corner. And before you go any further, go ahead and clear out these infection forms first. By doing that, you'll have a safe place to fall back to as you hold out against these enemies if you fight it out. Alternatively, you can just run past these guys if you don't have the patience to fight them, or if you want to complete the mission in a more efficient manner. So this is the part where you can control the flood spawning activity. So as soon as you walk out into that hallway, the flood will come after you. But as soon as you back up around the corner, then they'll stop briefly. This next part can be a little bit tricky, so what you want to do is just peek around the corner, try to get a grenade towards the end of the hall. And what you want to do is try to take out the flood with the rocket launcher at the end. Just be careful you're not standing near a piece of cover where he can easily do blast damage to you. Up ahead on this part, through the vent on the right, you'll find that a bunch of combat forms will spawn through with plasma rifles and plasma pistols. And these guys, you can just try to use your grenades and shotgun as efficiently as you can to take them out. After you cross the invisible line by that corner, you'll have a bunch of carrier forms drop into the area. Before moving on, I would clear them out using the plasma rifle or plasma pistol, whichever you happen to find that works. This engagement just outside the elevator, you can skip this part if you want, if you're really low on ammo. And as far as I'm aware, not many of these combat forms will drop shotguns or pistols for you. I'm gonna try to do my best to conserve ammo by picking up their weapons. So while the plasma pistol isn't always the most effective against the combat forms, it does a pretty decent job of tearing off their limbs. Somehow my pistol landed way over there. Definitely don't want to lose track of that. Once you're up on the 3rd floor, go ahead and use your pistol to knock these guys out from long range. And usually a couple of the combat forms will drop shotguns for you. So if you happen to be out of ammo or really low, then you'll be in luck. Same goes if you happen to be low on the pistol ammo. Down this hall, this is where the pistol comes in really handy. So you can just try to target them safely from a distance without having to try to close the distance with the shotgun, and without having to try to chuck a grenade with the low ceilings in the hallway. Once you made your way through that hallway, go ahead and try and make your way quickly above ground. And what you'll want to do on this part is try and meet the flood as soon as they spawn in. And that was a really unfortunate explosion. I was very lucky to survive that. Yikes. That's about the closest to death as I have been against the flood on this mission, I think. Kind of wishing I saved the health kit from the previous area, but oh well. I'll just have to make work with what I got. So coming up on this locked door, try to get a grenade on the left hand side as quickly as possible. And this is a part where you're just gonna want to hold out by the door. Make sure you save at least one frag grenade at this point. After a short bit, Spark will open the door for you. Now this is where the frag grenade comes in handy. Go ahead and chuck it right around that ledge, and that should usually take out the flood with the rocket launcher around the corner. There you can see the rocket launcher, and you can pick up this one for the upcoming couple of encounters. Just try to get the flood's attention first, and then use the rockets to take out the combat forms behind the carrier forms. As for this encounter, wait for the flood to jump on the boxes before you fire the rockets.
Was specifically built to study and contain the flood. Their survival as a race was dependent upon it. I am grateful to see that some of them survived.
Once again, when you come up on these enemies, clear out the ones that jump up from below in the hole, and then make your way behind this corner and hold off against the remaining combat forms. Coming up here in this enclosed area, this is going to be one of the tougher engagements that I'll have to deal with for this mission. But there is a really easy workaround if you're wanting to skip this entirely.
I will deactivate the security lock. Wait here.
So what you can do if you want to skip the encounter here is just hide in this corner and stay out of sight from the flood. Otherwise you can just hang out in the open and try to survive as long as you can against these guys. Just try to use your grenades to the best of your ability as you hold out against these guys. I think it's best to try to switch back and forth between the frags and the plasmas. And it works really well because you'll want to clear the floor of any grenades so that you don't get caught in a chain reaction. And I got pretty lucky there with all the combat forms just getting stuck in this one vent. So that just left me with the other one to deal with respawning flood. Usually you won't get quite that lucky. And then back behind these, this support beam, you'll find a couple of health kits if you need it. Up ahead here, go ahead and chuck a frag grenade ahead, and then watch those enemies fly. This is another part that you can skip entirely. The sentinels will kill these guys for you if you're patient enough. And the sentinels do a rather nice job of clearing out the infection forms after these carriers pop. Now, I was about to say it looked like I was about in the clear. And there we go, all clear. So this can be a fairly long mission if you choose to fight all these enemies, but it can be a fairly quick one if you're along the lines of speedrunning, or if you're skipping some sections and then staying around and killing them in others. Be careful when you make your way up to the 4th floor, you'll have these carrier forms waiting for you. If you accidentally lose some health, there's a health kit right here waiting for you. Also check the corner for any carrier forms as well. Because right here there's going to be a whole nother ambush point where you'll have combat forms dropping from the up in the ceiling. Now what's weird about this encounter is sometimes the combat forms will actually get killed from the fall damage. But even when that happens, they'll simply regenerate and get back up to fight you, so be careful if that happens. Once that hallway's clear, if you chose to stick around and fight those guys, you can go back and pick up the health kit if you saved it. And the door up ahead is only partially open, but you can't access it unless if you do a really well-placed grenade jump. Otherwise, just make your way down below through these tunnels and take these carrier forms carefully. Once again, make sure to kill all these infection forms before you proceed up top. And why I do this is because this turns out to be another holdout section. And this one can be just about as tough as the one that we had to deal with on the 3rd floor. Except now we'll have enemies coming up through the tunnels as well. So the best way to hold out here is just to stick by this health kit. And use your plasma grenades and frag grenades if you look to be getting overwhelmed. Once Spark opens the door, you can just ignore the enemies that continue to spawn in here. Otherwise, it's a little bit easier to hold out against these guys at this point. Also, beware of Flood jumping through the door behind you. Oof. And I came really close to death there. I knew there was a grenade on the floor. I played that a little bit too risky. But it turns out luck worked in my favor for this part. Down below there's another health kit if you happen to use one earlier. And now right here we're going to get ambushed by all these carrier forms. And the best way to deal with these guys is just to let them gather up close to you here. And then let them bow down to you and set themselves off. Pretty sure that's not how it works in real life if you're gonna bow down to a king or a queen. Just before we reach the index, there's going to be a point here where we get ambushed by all these combat forms. So just get their attention and then back up in this hallway that you came from. Make sure to save a decent number of grenades for the final part of the mission. You'll probably want at least 2 frag grenades and maybe a couple of plasmas as well. Be mindful as you go through this final door because there will not be any health kits waiting inside for us. So for these guys, you can either chuck a grenade and try to kill all these guys. Otherwise, you can get up close and personal with the shotgun. And then as soon as the door opens, go ahead and get a couple of frags inside and then back away if the floods start charging. Look both to the right and the left of you as you make your way inside. You'll have combat forms that'll be perched up high on these platforms. At this point, you can run all the way to Guilty Spark to reach the index and end the mission. Otherwise, this can be another area where you can try to hold out against the Horde for a little while. So what you'll want to do is make your way to the left in this room and then just hold out around the corner, letting all these combat forms come directly to you. And for this last engagement, there won't be any carrier forms to set off any chain explosions. And since this is the end of the level, you can use up all the grenades that you have in your inventory. And then once the area is all clear, then we can go ahead and reach the center of the platform.
The energy barrier surrounding the index will deactivate when we reach the ground floor. You may now retrieve the index. Protocol requires that I take possession of the index for transport. Your organic form renders you vulnerable to infection. The index must not fall into the hands of the Flood before we reach the control room and activate the installation. The Flood is spreading. We must hurry.
And that is the end of my run on the library. So it can be a fairly long mission if you choose to fight all these enemies out. It can be a fairly short mission if you choose to speedrun it otherwise. But I find that this mission personally, and I think the majority of the Halo community would agree as well, that this is probably the least favorite mission in the game. For me, it's mainly because of the level design and the encounters. It gets fairly repetitive once you get past the second and third floor. It just turns into a long grind fighting out against the Flood. But if you take it slow, if you're a beginner, and just try to use the corners and pieces of cover to the best of your advantage, as well as the occasional grenade, you can get through this mission without too much trouble, hopefully. Maybe without too many deaths for the most part. So hopefully you guys found this guide to be really helpful if you're trying to go through this mission the crazy long way as I did. And thank you all for joining in with me on this episode. I appreciate all the support that I've been receiving on my guides thus far, and hopefully I will catch you on the next guide.